This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward. Shane, we're seeing something with our partners that I find very interesting in that our commercial production is going up amidst this hard market.
Yes, and we have a lot more interest in agents getting into commercial and creating a commercial opportunity for themselves. I think it's a natural response to market shifts and market struggles within personal lines, especially in areas where you might have some heavier cat-prone states or cat-prone geography. Commercial has been through a hard market, still has some hardening going on, but it's really in different segments. And so you kind of have to break that down and think about, okay, well, what are you talking about? Because I'm not seeing that. Well, it may be that you're a small business writer versus, say, a mid-market writer. We have to define that first before we start talking about why is this shift going on.
So let's define that.
And this is me. Different people, different parts of the country. Depends on what you do, what agency you work at. Define small business, middle market, and large accounts or large commercial differently. I personally kind of look at the small business arena around BOP and around what a lot of standard preferred carriers offer in terms of simplified access through their technology platform. You have to kind of think about this in terms of where you are in the country, where you are from an agency standpoint, and what size agency, starting out from a former captive, existing independent. People are going to define this differently, but when I think of small business, I think of accounts that probably generate less than $3,000, maybe up to $5,000 in commission revenue, not premium, which means $20,000 to $30,000 in premium. I think about it around BOPs or business owner packages, or I think about it around the ability for you as an agent to conduct business and write business and quote business through some automated platform, carrier portals. And some of the carriers define this by naming it Select. Travelers Select. That's their small business platform. When I think about small business, that's what I think about. As you start moving into middle market, you get into having to submit to underwriters. You get into a little bit different types of risk, a little bit more hair on it, so to speak.
A little bit more what?
Hair. You've been in the South.
That must be an East Texas thing.
Maybe it is, but
It's got a little more hair on it.
Yeah, it's a little tougher to handle, It's a really funny thing because it's one of those things inside the industry. Some people kind of get macho about it and they start trying to call small business accounts that are $100,000, $200,000 in premium. That's not small business to most people. That's big business. When you get up into regional agencies and what I call the jumbo organizations, well, they start at writing $500,000 premium accounts. And so for the rest of us, right, for the majority of us, we're going to define our small business and middle market as starting from zero to up to about 25, 30,000 in premium for small, and then 30 up to 100, 150,000 for middle market. That's just what we're going to say. And I think it's natural for personal lines agents to start thinking about this because a lot of their customers might be business owners.
Okay.
And that's where the natural progression happens, is the client that you have from a personal line standpoint, and it might be a really, really solid personal lines account, 3 or 4 vehicles, really nice home, some toys, the account $8,000 to $10,000 in premium by itself, and then the conversation transpires at the ball game. Hey, do you do commercial? Can you look at my business insurance? I've never really thought about asking you, but I was thinking about it the other day. My renewal comes up. And then the agent, as a salesperson,
says yes.
Absolutely, yes, I can do that, right?
That for you.
And so it's a natural progression. Here's really where I want to go with this. Actually, I love the natural progression from the reverse of that. And that is focusing on finding your way into this small business arena, because the small business arena may not be super profitable to write a business owner package, a BOP, for a flower shop. It may be $1,200 in premium. It doesn't generate you a lot of money. They're simple. So you go there and you write this policy and you're like, man, it's only going to generate $200 a year in revenue. Why do I want to do that? Well, you want to think about that from the standpoint of, then you write the owner's insurance and then you write some employees' insurance. And there's a lot of customers inside a place of business. Mm-hmm. And how you choose the class of business, the type of business you go after, might help you dictate the opportunities in personal lines too. So there's a lead generation opportunity for soliciting certain commercial accounts for the purpose of actually also getting into their personal lines business, and vice versa. So I actually like that avenue. I like the idea of, I'm going to go write this HVAC contractor, and I'm going to try to be their full-time agent around all of it, the full circle of personal and commercial, not just I'm going to write their commercial account. We have to broaden our brain here and think about this and do this intentionally. It's just like anything else we would talk about. There's an intentional process to going after small commercial.
If I've heard you say it once, I have heard you say it at least 1,000 times. We're not talking about dabbling. Don't dabble.
Right. So let's go back to our friend that has that nice personal lines account and hits you up. If you don't write any commercial, then don't do it. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about doing it because you don't want to say no. But having an intentional plan to educate yourself, qualify yourself, have a commercial lines offering is not dabbling. Investing in that. Is it you, or is it a hiring process for a producer for commercial? What's going to happen here? A lot of the agency owners I talk with that are heavy into personal lines that want to create a commercial lines opportunity for themselves, they generally feel pretty good that they have their personal lines business figured out. And having individuals that are handling that business, account managers and so forth, even like an inside sales rep, having that part of your business structured so that it's kind of operating a little bit without you too much because you're out doing the marketing. And then you, as the agency owner, stepping into this commercial producer area makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like it re-energizes sometimes that agent to step off into this. Now, you need to learn. You need to be educated. You need to learn what you're doing, and you need to have a plan, and you need to have an intentional process. But you're probably the talented person that needs to go do this.
What do you do if you're the solopreneur?
Well, if you're the solopreneur, you're probably not ready because you're either picking one or the other. You're not typically going to be a generalist of personal and commercial lines as a solopreneur. You might be commercial focused or you might be personal focused, but you're rarely both as a solopreneur. So if you're a solopreneur and you don't have that opportunity yet, that's where you get in trouble with the dabbling because you don't have anyone to sort of turn that personal lines business over to. It's still you. So I don't advise doing that at that level. I advise waiting until you get a base book of business, a base of revenue, a staff, and you actually have an agency at this point instead of just being an agent.
I think solopreneurs that don't have a commercial focus a lot of times don't realize how much time away from their agency that it takes to write commercial.
That's right. It's one of those things that you don't know because you've never done it. You have this opinion or perception of things. It's probably not a good perception or it's not a true perception. I'll say this. If you are that agency owner that's built that personal lines book of business and you have a staff, things are running pretty smooth, and you're the marketer out in the community, there's a huge opportunity at that point to become the commercial lines expert, to become the commercial lines operator, so to speak, in your agency and build another book of business. Because that's kind of how you have to look at it. I've built this book around personal. Now I'm going to build a new book around commercial. Same agency, under the same roof. That is sort of this intentional process that I think that an agency owner should take, because you've already done some things that you can utilize and leverage, your community networking events, your social media. There's a lot of opportunity around social media, around commercial lines, and especially on a small business standpoint. What's a small business? Well, a small business is a person that owns a business just like you. There's a lot of things you can talk about. Offering to help them with their business That's a great prospecting tool. Becoming a consultant, so to speak. You're a risk manager. They need you just like they need their CPA and attorney.
If I'm working on commission, why is it better to start with small business as opposed to a medium or a larger business?
One is the complicated nature of what's generally medium or larger businesses. Number two is you're probably going toe-to-toe with some organization, agency that already has all the expertise in place on the larger accounts. That's the one thing about that mid-sized business. That mid-sized business that's just too large to be in the small business category probably still sees themselves as a small business. We define it on the health insurance side, and we define it under 50 employees or under 200 employees. Under 50 employees or 40 employees, I promise you that's not real small. There's a lot of revenue if you have 40 W-2 employees. So that's one of those things of like, okay, what's my perception of what a small business is versus what is really a small business? So there's things you get into that's complicated. There are things that you find out on a business that has 30 or 40 employees. They may be generating insurance premiums $150,000, $200,000 a year. There's probably some complicated nature to that. And when you have that kind of target on your back as a business owner, there's a lot of competition that's coming after you. Why I like to start small. And when I say small, I'm still back to the BOP, the business owner package. I'm talking about doing their comp. I'm talking about doing their commercial auto, etc. I'm okay starting out writing that account that's a little more simple, that the larger agencies or the mid-size agency feels like it's not worth their time. That account doesn't generate enough revenue for that producer. Some agencies, I would say most on the larger end, do not pay commissions to their producers on accounts that don't generate a certain amount of revenue.
Wow. Okay.
So find that mark in your area where all of the bigger boys, so to speak, their producers aren't being paid, so they're not looking at it. And maybe they wrote that account 10 years ago and it's parked inside with an account manager who never sees them and sends them a letter every year. And go after that account. That account might generate $3,000 a year in revenue. But maybe the agency has said, hey, we're not paying you producers on any account that generates less than $10,000 a year. So now they're not looking at that $20,000 or $30,000 premium account that's only going to generate $3,000. They're looking at the mid-market account, that larger account. So now you've just eliminated producer competition. And if you're going to start writing some commercial and you learn what you need to learn and take some courses and do some things with carriers and learn the training, because you can get access. Shameless plug, call us if you need access. But you can get access to these carriers and they're efficient from a technology standpoint. And all of a sudden, you're writing $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 accounts that aren't necessarily harder than the personal lines accounts you write, which is snowballing because it's working together, and you're writing the personal lines accounts, you're writing the commercial accounts to go with those personal lines accounts, and now you've got this total relationship that could equal $20,000, $30,000 a year in premium between personal and commercial lines.
I'm choosing to start small. What types of businesses should I start with?
Start with accounts that are not heavy certificate type accounts, so certificates of insurance. A lot of contractors that work in certain areas are going to have to provide certificates, proof of coverage to certain general contractors, municipalities, etc. It's not that you can't do certificates. It's not that you shouldn't avoid accounts just because you might have to do a couple of certificates. What you want to watch out for is that small business by premium account that is actually a bad business underneath the hood because they're not watching what they're doing, and they're working in too many different municipalities, and they're having to issue 1,000 certificates a year. That happens out there.
Don't ask us how we know this.
Yeah. And all of a sudden you write this account and you do well, and then you forget the whole certificate conversation, and they say, hey, here's our certificate holder list. Now you're staring at 3 days of work that you didn't know about. I'm not opposed to contractors, but I'm opposed to contractors who are bad for you. So I don't know how to define that better, but it happens and you kind of find yourself in a bad spot. I love classes of business that fit my efficient carriers. So if I'm working with Liberty, Travelers, Hartford, and Hanover, on the small business side, they all have portals, they're efficient. I'm going to look at their classes of business that they want to write, and then I'm going to look around and I'm going to say, which of those businesses are businesses that I can go after?
You've talked me into it. I want to do this. How do I get market access?
The interesting thing about small commercial, you can have access to a certain carrier's small business section without having access to their middle market. Getting access to middle market, you got to bring some premium to the table. You got to bring some experience to the table. You got to have a big team of people with lots of letters behind their name. I mean, there's a lot of professional things going on in mid-market and large accounts, just to be clear. Not that we want to demean small business at all, because that's not the case. However, when you kind of look at what the carriers have done around technology, keep in mind, they don't want to touch a lot of this small business stuff. They want it to flow through because they feel like they've got their underwriting figured out. They feel like they've got their risk criteria figured out. And if you give them accurate information about that business and they spit out a rate, they feel very good about being profitable on that business. And so access is actually easier, in my view, within the small business area than it is in personal lines. It's a different dynamic. It's generally something you can write across geographies more easily, across states more easily. One of the really cool ideas that I've seen before are agents that decided to go after a very, very small number of classes of business. And I'm going to pick on one. I'm just going to make it up and call it donut shops. So maybe bakeries would fall under that. But literally way back before social media, I was aware of an agent that went out and basically secured the domain Donut Shop Insurance. They marketed themselves that way, and they started and went kind of an inside out approach, and they ended up writing donut shops or small bakeries across multiple states by doing this. That single class of business was easier to access, and they had access to those carriers on a much easier basis because it was very automated. So there's a number of outlets. You're probably not going to get access direct to those carriers day one. It's okay. There are MGAs, there are groups, there are market access providers that provide access to carriers, big name, well-branded, small business carriers in most states. If you're able to get a license there, you're able to do business there. So it's generally a lot easier, and the irony of it is you would think it would be harder.
Going into a small business, presenting them with a quote, what do you need to show them that you as a newer agency or as a small business yourself that makes you stand out?
It's the same thing that we talk about on the personal line side. I think it's relational, that you care. Because again, they're not used to people caring about them. If you're willing to do that and not see that small business owner package that only generates you that $200 or $300 in commission, if that's what you see, you're going to come across that way, right? And they're used to people at this point not thinking they're big enough for their business. The bank isn't necessarily catering to them. Nobody's really giving them attention. If you're willing to go in and show them attention, but see through and past just that smaller commission and look at the owner's personal insurance, look at writing insurance and offering insurance to their employees, you start seeing that small business as an entire ecosystem for your agency, referral system. That's really the way to stand out in my view. Writing insurance for CPAs, that's a good one. A lot of people get scared away by this, but writing insurance for attorneys,
they need it, trust me.
They need it.
I'm looking at Small Business Administration numbers. Mm-hmm. There are 31.7 million small businesses in the United States. That's 99.9% of businesses in the U.S.
There are a lot of carriers, including Berkshire Hathaway themselves, that have launched very targeted, technology-oriented small business offerings, and they would not be doing this if it wasn't a profitable sector.
switching from a home and auto focus to commercial lines, how do I have to budget my business differently?
I want to suggest that we're not switching, we're adding. And I don't want to imply that after you've built that book of business in personal lines for you to sort of switch your focus. What I want you to do is I want you to think about designing and building and creating around your personal lines book this ability for that book of business to operate without you. And I want you to add commercial to it. That's one thing. I don't want you to think about switching your focus, because that business needs to stay. It needs to provide you that foundation so that you can fund your effort into commercial. Again, there's things you have to do. Remember, we talk about org charts where there might be 12 blocks on your org chart and you have 3 people, so there's multiple people in each block and your name may be in 6 different blocks. Well, the type of business and how you pursue this, are you going to be able to use a little bit of your capacity for CSR that's also kind of doing some of your personal lines business to help you with the commercial? Or are you going to have to take care of the commercial business exclusively by yourself? So that's a question of skill set. That's a question of who are you? So funding this may be extremely inexpensive. It also may require you to go out and hire a whole new person.
Okay, so we get asked this all the time. I'm bringing on a commercial lines producer. Can they just write some personal lines at the start to help cover the cost?
Please don't do it. I know it feels like it should work. It feels like the low-hanging fruit. It's easy. I was recently having a discussion with a friend of mine. We were talking about missionaries because relatives that he has, a young couple going into the mission field. And what was interesting about that conversation and something that he was explaining to me was that the mission organization hires these missionaries months before they leave. They hire and pay them during their training. They don't train and work their day job and then leave. They get hired to be a missionary. They go to work as training, and that takes like a year, which means they don't have a side job. They have a job in the United States training. And why do they do that? It's because they want them solely focused on preparation and when they get there and being ready, because they're moving to this foreign country, they're moving away from their family, they're moving into this totally new scene. And I think it's very similar to what we're talking about. You don't want this new commercial producer who's going through all of these things and learning how to do this while also keeping their toe in the water back over here just so you can feel a little better about funding them. You need to step forward as an agency owner and think about the funding mechanism. That's my view. Because it's going to be very easy, write one personal lines account, then next thing you know, they're writing 3. The next thing you know, they're writing 10. Before you know it, you have a personal lines producer. You don't have a commercial lines producer. That is what I can see happening if you're not funding them to truly be a commercial producer.
What personality traits are best to be a commercial producer?
Commercial is still shaking hands, personal cold calling, not necessarily getting on the phone. I'm not talking about dialing for dollars. I'm talking about getting up and going. I think it's still an outside sales role, whereas personal lines a lot of times has moved to an inside sales role. I firmly believe that commercial is an outside sales role, so you have to be able to go. You have to be able to be a conversation starter. You have to have a little bit of thick skin and be okay with no. There is outgoing. Can you be a technical risk manager? Can you convert from being an account manager to a sales producer? Maybe. The only time I've seen that happen, it was really that they were a salesperson working as an account manager, and then when they became a producer, they really found their sweet spot. And we like to say, oh, but there was this one person that moved from account management to sales producer, but we're lying to ourselves. They were really a sales producer working an account management job. I haven't seen the really technical type person be super successful in the sales producer, commercial producer role. I just think that what happens is they get too caught up in the BIPD, using too many insurance terms.
Okay, I just looked at you like, what?
Yeah, they get too used to using the insurance terminology instead of being a real person. And that's a character trait of commercial producers that makes them very rare.
What can go wrong when I'm starting out in commercial?
Chasing the wrong accounts. You can get burned out really quickly. You chase the wrong accounts, you get into complicated accounts, as I said a little earlier, accounts with a little more hair on it, and you get burned out. And that is sort of this rabbit hole that would hurt you. Also, just not understanding the coverage differences and understanding that there is some education that you need to put yourself through. There's a lot of resources. National Alliance has resources. Carriers have resources. There are producer schools that carriers offer that they'll let you go through. You can put yourself or a commercial producer that you hire through a producer school. It's going to teach you a combination of sales approaches plus coverage and technical things. Choosing to go the cheap route, choosing to have a shortcut route is where things generally go off the rails.
I'm going to leave us today with this quote from Billie Jean King. Champions keep playing until they get it right.
Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
Ready to get the ball rolling with your independent agency? Learn more at IntegraAgent.com. That's IntegraAgent.com. Thank you for joining us on IA Forward. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now or learn more at IAForward.com.